Now for our roundtable with Mary Anna Mancuso, Republican political strategist, and News Channel 5 political analyst Brian Crowley. A belated Happy New Year, as I was down covering the president last week as we were getting ready for To The Point, but we appreciate you being here and strap in for 2020. The legislative session beginning this week in Tallahassee, looking at controversial topics. One of those, abortion. A proposal would require minors to have the consent of a parent or guardian before an abortion unless it's an emergency. The House Speaker and Senate President, both Republicans, support it. It's likely to pass. Talk about its impact on races this year, and of course the big one in November, presidential race, and people's sentiment about what happens here. Abortion always a national issue as well. So it ties in, at least in that sense, to people's sentiment. It will have passed before then. It won't drive them directly to the polls, but it does drive sentiment in a big way at the state and national level. Brian?
Well, I mean, abortion is always a hot button issue. This is, narrowly focused to minors requiring consent. It really has, in my view, it really has nothing to do with minors. Republicans have been pushing this for a long time. They've been pushing this because they oppose abortion. They're not trying to protect the minor. They oppose abortion, and I think the honest ones will admit that.
Mary Anna, your take on the issue?
We saw a similar law tried to be passed in 1989, and the Florida Supreme Court struck it down. And I don't think that this is going to have the legs outside of the legislature. And again, as I have continued to say, and I will continue to say, I don't believe that men should be sitting around trying to legislate a minor's uterus or a grown woman's uterus.
How is a galvanizing...
There are some women in the legislature.
Well, I hope that they get in on this, because right now we understand that's being led by...
True.
How is a galvanizing issue is your sense of it, both at the Florida level, and we've seen what's been happening with the abortion debate nationally. It's the kind of year where it can be one of those issues that galvanizes voters, despite the legal challenges that it may well face. Your sense of that? It's
becoming a slippery slope. We've seen the heartbeat bill passed in some of the states across the country, and I think that if we see something like the legislature has in mind for this abortion bill for minor consent having from parents, I think that this opens us up the floodgates for this to become a larger issue.
But I think if you look at it in a bigger context, if you look at, the part of the reason some Republicans are willing to endure Donald Trump is because they see appointments to the Supreme Court, they see appointments to federal judges, they see legislation that will potentially, in their view, ban abortion. So, for a lot of conservative Republicans, the base of the party, this is a key issue, and anything that limits abortion, they look at favorably, so it doesn't hurt the Republican running in his district. Another
issue, immigration. Governor DeSantis could well find opposition from fellow Republicans. The governor wants businesses to use E-Verify to make sure employees are documented. He pushed this for last year. Some large companies don't want it because they rely on cheap labor. The governor's made it a priority yet again. Talk about the politics behind this.
Well, this was a campaign promise he had when he ran in 2016, and so we're going to see him try to really drum up support, and hopefully he'll be able to get that done, because that'll be a feather in his cap.
Brian?
Well, there's a certain irony that, and I applaud Governor DeSantis for pushing this, because his party in particular has really been pushing anti-illegal immigration action. And it's ironic that some of the biggest supporters of the party, the business community, are the ones that Florida Chamber of Commerce, Associated Industries, and some other large business organizations that are pushing this idea that we shouldn't have E-Verify, which would require a business to determine whether or not somebody is here legally. Maybe another big question that needs to be addressed as part of this is, why do these businesses want to keep these workers? Is it because they don't have to pay them very much money? Is it because they don't have to give them benefits? Is it because they don't have to worry about their health care? Is it because it's a profit-making thing for the businesses? There's something fundamentally wrong that we allow this to happen.
And his issue and this debate will dovetail with the issue we'll see on the national campaign trail. Donald Trump, of course, President Donald Trump, immigration, such a huge issue. So many of these Florida issues are going to dovetail.
He's had problems with illegal immigration on his own properties.
And all of this is going to dovetail in terms of the electorate mood and how it drives people out to the polls. We want to talk about 2 years after the Parkland shooting. February 14th will mark the 2-year anniversary of that massacre that claimed 17 lives. School bill went into law that did a lot, but its supporters say we're not going to go much farther in terms of additional gun control measures. It's a Republican-controlled legislature, may close some background check loopholes. Others have tried to weaken provisions about keeping people from buying a gun until they're 21. What is your sense 2 years on of anything that will happen in a Republican-led legislature substantively as it goes to school safety, and especially as it might relate to gun measures?
I don't think much more is going to happen.
Background checks at least expanded?
Maybe. I think that there
Or
is...
loopholes?
We tend to, we get all excited about it at the moment these things happen, and then more and more now, it doesn't take much time at all before the issue starts getting pushed to the back burner. I will tell you that as somebody who has a grandchild in the 2nd grade, and I think I mentioned this once before on air, who had to go through active shooter training, I didn't know at the time just how real they make these active shooter trainings. She cried inconsolably for several days. Another little boy in her class doesn't want to wear lighted sneakers because he's afraid his hideaway will be given away. I don't know what we're doing to the little kids with this stuff, and we may not know for a long time.
Mary Anna, from a legislative point of view, I mean, they have their ear to the ground, presumably, of voters across Florida. Your take on this election year about where we go with this, if anywhere?
We know that in the committee, they're looking to close the background check loophole, which I am in full support of. However, we also know that there are some members of the legislature that do not believe that that is going to come out of the committee, get to a vote, and be able to be passed by the legislature, because it's not advantageous. As you say, this is an election year. And let's face it, Republicans, hard right Republicans, love their guns, and they don't want anything to prohibit them from getting guns.
Legislative and political footballs, plenty of other things like Amendment 4, giving ex-felons the right to vote, continues to be a political football. We'll talk about more about all those issues in the coming weeks, but closing comments from you two when we come back.